All right, good evening, everyone. It is 5:30, and I will call this policy committee meeting to order. Ms. Shope, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Megan Miller,
Present.
Greg Schneider,
Present.
Amy Levy.
Here.
All members are present with Megan Miller virtual.
Thank you so much. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve our June policy committee minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. That motion passes unanimously, and that brings us to 2A, Policy 187, Public Participation at Board Meetings. Board Member Schneider, we'll take this one page at a time. Any questions or adjustments for page 1?
Pardon the
Do we need to
interruption.
approve
Did you
the
approve the
agenda?
agenda?
I do not have
We
anything
did.
for page 1.
I believe that we did. Do we? All right, hold on. Let's back up. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Shope.
You're welcome.
Board Member Miller, I see that your hand is raised, so as soon as Board Member Schneider is done with his comments, go right ahead, please. Board Member Miller, please unmute.
Oh, okay. I think I was raising my hand about the agenda thing. It's okay. Board Member Schneider can start. That's totally fine.
Do you have any comments or suggestions for page 1? Okay, I'm going to take the silence as a no. I had a couple of things. In that first paragraph, individuals is crossed out and it has new information. I am in favor of keeping any individual. And then at the end of that first paragraph, I know there was discussion at our meeting last month about outlining how the public can participate in committee meetings. And so I'll read it and get feedback from committee members. If this is fine with you adding, Ms. Shope, don't worry, I'll repeat it. So what I am recommending as the new sentence at the end of that first paragraph is individuals recognized by a committee chair are able to speak regarding noticed agenda items during committee meetings. Are there any edits, any feedback to that new sentence?
I agree with the sentence.
Okay. Board Member
I do as well.
Okay. So Ms. Shope, I will read the first part and then the second part. You let me know if you need to repeat anything, and then this is a recommended addition at the end of the first paragraph. Individuals recognized by the committee chair are able to speak regarding noticed agenda items during committee meetings. Would you like me to repeat? Okay. And just for clarity, is there anyone opposed to keeping that first paragraph as is with any individual? Or is there any committee member that would like to change it to the information that's highlighted in green? Board Member Schneider, I'll start with you.
I am okay with individual.
Okay. Board Member Miller, same question.
Sure. Yeah. So just to clarify, we're looking at policy 187 and not a rule.
Correct,
I just wanna make sure.
187, that
Okay,
first
cool.
paragraph.
Yeah. As I stated last time, and I know I put this in an email to you, just like have zero interest in limiting who may participate. So I'm just like interested in keeping it as like any individual.
Okay. And then the next item that we discussed at our June meeting talked about legal obligations or any legal regulations with publicly providing home address and full name of someone who comes to speak. And for the benefit of anyone who may be listening, the committee did receive an email regarding that. But Dr. Garrison, would you just like to share any information on what we are legally obligated to provide to the public?
So, as pertains to,
If I want to come and speak during public comment, do I have to give my name and full address? Now, I understand that we may need to record that information. It goes to Ms. Shope, but our current practice is anyone who's in the room and comes to the mic, they state their name and address that's recorded and lives on the World Wide Web. And then we also talked about the discrepancy with someone who emails in a comment. They may provide that information so Ms. Shope has it, but it's not included in the reading of their email. So I'm just wondering, what are we legally obligated to disclose with respect to personal information of someone wishing to participate in public comment?
sure, as it stands, there's, so if the body chooses to provide public comment, they can set aside a policy with restrictions on participation. Some districts restrict comments. Our district currently doesn't. For that reason, there's nothing in the law that states that we have to do that.
No, the question is specifically about someone wishing to give public comment. Are there any legal obligations that they have to share their home address and their full name? I know that's information that we capture, but is there anything preventing us from saying moving forward, they can provide that information to the board secretary, but they don't have to announce it before their public comment?
So, as I understand it, the law does not require public bodies to provide a public comment period, but that's public comment. But you're saying that addresses, is that what we're focusing on?
Correct. If I want to come and participate in public comment, our current practice is I would state my name and my address, and then my 3 minutes would start. And my concern is there anything legally requiring us to encourage people to share their full name and their home address? Now, I understand we'll still capture that information and have it for our records if we ever need it, for follow-up purposes, et cetera. But are there any legal disclosure requirements where someone would have to publicly share their full name and address?
There's not anything specific to that response. It's really up to how we decide to write the policy. So there's no law that makes them do that. It's up to the board to decide whether or not we want that to be a part of our policy.
Okay, so thank you for providing that clarity. Committee members, is anyone opposed? We'll still collect the information, but adjusting the policy so individuals wishing to participate don't have to state their full name and address before they give public comment. So first of all, was the question clear? And then, all right, perfect. Board Member Schneider, go first, please.
As long as they include it on the sheet that they hand in to the secretary, I'm fine with them not having to state it publicly.
Committee Member Miller.
Thank you. I agree with adding that to the policy, and I think in terms of the language, I really like how you're saying collect, because if somebody is able to write it down on a comment card, great. If there's some ability, like I don't want to be ableist, so if people can just speak it to Ms. Shope or whatever. So I liked your general use of that word. Thank you.
No problem. All right, so the information, the line that is stricken, it seems like we are okay. You will come to the microphone. Are we comfortable with just saying state first name?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just says first and last.
Right, and so that's why my question was, are we comfortable with just stating your first name? We'll capture the information. So Ms. Shope will still, on the comment card, that's not being changed. It'll be first name, last name, home address, whatever they want to speak about. That will stay the same. They just don't have to publicly share that on the microphone that's then recorded on the World Wide Web. They'll just say, hello, I'm Amy, and their 3 minutes will start, and they'll go. All right.
Point of clarification.
Please.
So when I'm calling then from the cards to have those people come up, I'm only calling by first name?
Please. And if we have 2 Amy's, Amy L. and Amy whomever.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I just noticed one other place for clarification. There's a parentheses in the beginning of the second paragraph that says special board meetings and committee meetings will not have a designated time for public comment. Am I striking that?
How do board members feel about that?
I noticed it and felt it was in conflict with the new sentence you were adding.
No, I appreciate you highlighting that. And the new sentence does specifically say committee meetings. I am not opposed, and again, it's at the discrepancy of the chair. But for example, if we have a special meeting and there's someone that wishes to be recognized from the floor because there's not an allocated public comment time, I'm not opposed to allowing the chair the discrepancy to do that. Board Member Schneider, what are your comments on that?
I am okay with that. I think giving people the opportunity to share their concerns, their points of view with the board is important.
And again, just so we're clear, this is anyone who's recognized by the chair. So we have the guidelines for our regular board members and how public comment flows. However it happens in special committee meetings or special meetings or committee meetings, that is at the leading of the chair. So just so we're clear on that. Board Member Miller, do you have any concerns or object to the chair having the authority to recognize someone who may want to speak from the floor during special board meetings?
No, I think that's very appropriate. I just wanted to clarify, is the question has to do with the language about, like, we wouldn't have, so, like, there's a difference between being recognized and, like noticing public comment at a committee meeting. So my thoughts on that are, I don't think we necessarily have to have in policy that we will not have public comment at a committee meeting, but I do think that it's good practice not to, because it's really more of like a work group kind of, it's like just a different kind of philosophical focus. But I mean, there's nothing, I mean, removing that sentence about not having public comment would allow the chair to say, you know, actually, there's this big exciting thing coming through committee. People might have something to say about it. Maybe we'll post a public comment. So I can go either way. I do agree with the sentiment, though, that in general it's good practice not to have like a whole public comment item listed on the agenda of a committee meeting. But to your actual question that you asked, no, I have no problem at all with having the chair note, like, just recognize whoever wants to speak as long as it's on a noticed agenda item.
Perfect. So Ms. Shope will strike that sentence that's in parentheses in the second paragraph. All right, second page, any questions or edits? Board Member Schneider, you first.
I had nothing new.
Okay, Board Member Miller, same question.
Did we touch on the last piece on that first paragraph about more than 1 or 2 people yielding time?
No one brought it up when asked if they had questions or edits. So as it stands, and we'll go back to the first page, it says, however, no more than one person may yield his or their time to any one speaker. I'm actually fine with this because I think in moments where we have lots of interest around public comment, this would allow for multiple different voices to have space in the room. Are you opposed to changing that from 2 to 1?
Yeah, first I'd like to apologize because for some reason I was thinking that was on the second page, so I apologize for
No,
not
you're
bringing it up
fine.
when you gave me the opportunity. I don't feel like super strongly about it, and I really appreciate what you just shared. My thoughts, I kind of liked leaving it at 2 just because it gives people room to fully express thoughts. Some people get nervous, takes them a little longer to put their thoughts together and things like that. Like I said, I don't feel super strongly about it, but I don't know that it's necessarily preventing multiple voices. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, Board Member Schneider, what's your feeling? Are you okay with going from 2 to 1 with respect to yielding time, or do you feel strongly it should remain at 2?
I am okay with changing it to one other person. It's pretty rare that anybody goes over the 6 minutes. And it's a way to help control the amount of time that we spend in public comments. So I'm okay with leaving it as the one other person.
Perfect. So we will leave it as 1, but Board Member Miller, just want to remind you, again, if you change your mind and you feel strongly about that, feel free to pull it off the consent agenda when it arrives at the regular board meeting. Any questions or comments on page 2 of this policy, Board Member Miller?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't having a hard time unmuting. No, I think the second page looks good.
Okay. I just had a couple things. One, at the very top, it seems like a note got dropped in as if it is a part of policy. So where there's the double asterisk, this is where questions regarding speaking from the floor came into plan and having a plan regarding a person who will not leave peaceably. That was part of the discussion we had, but I'm not sure why that ended up in policy. So again, for anyone who's watching at home, there were discussions about people from the floor should not speak out of turn without being recognized. And if they won't stop, like, what is the plan for ensuring that they leave peaceably? Dr. Garrison, would you have any interest in actually handling that in administrative regulations for this policy?
Yeah, we can do that. That's not a problem.
Perfect. So Ms. Shope, if you could make note of that and just remove that last sentence at the top of the page. Thank you so much. And then at the very bottom, same concern, right above, thank you for your participation and courtesy. This information can also be captured on the public comment card and will be displayed on the screen during public comment time. I think that's a great practice to have. I don't think it needs to be noted in policy. And then the second bullet point that's being added about signage, banners, and other materials, which, since it already says which impedes any person's view in the proceedings, I don't think we need to specifically say including a board member's view. I think we're included in any person. And then again, the redundancy at the end, so not to obstruct views. So what I'm recommending that second bullet point say is signage, banners, or other materials which impede any person's view of the proceedings shall be relocated. Any objections to that, committee members?
No objection.
Sounds good.
Ms. Shope, did you need me to repeat that? Oh, no, got it. All right. So that concludes our review of policy 187. Is there a motion to move policy 187 to the full board for a first reading as revised?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. That brings us to policy 893, relations with educational researchers. Only a one-page policy. Board Member Schneider, any edits or questions for that first page?
I do not have any.
Okay, Board Member Miller, same question.
No, ma'am.
All right.
Looks good.
My only question in that first, or the second sentence says the superintendent is authorized to cooperate as far as possible with colleagues. Is there some special meaning to as far as possible?
Are you on the, which one are you on? I'm sorry.
Policy 893.
Correct. And you're as far as possible.
The second sentence, the superintendent is authorized to cooperate as far as possible with colleges, and then it goes through the list. Is there a reason for?
Because of this being a former policy, I'm going to make an assumption here that maybe it allowed the superintendent to cooperate, meaning for the sake of research and pressing on like educational benefits. But I don't know how you're reading it, Chair Levy.
Yeah, as far as possible just seemed like unnecessary word.
I agree.
I would be fine with the superintendent is authorized to cooperate with colleges, and it goes through the list. And I think the substance of what you're getting at is handled in the Rule 1. So is everyone okay with striking the as far as possible language?
Yes.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and look at Rule 1 of Policy 893, Administrative Guidelines for Conducting Research and Survey Projects. This also is one page. Board Member Schneider, any questions or additions for that first page?
I have no questions.
Okay. Board Member Miller, same question.
I thought it was thorough.
Okay, excellent. Just a few things. That first clause, the superintendent or designee, actually the first sentence seems kind of redundant and a repeat from the first one. Are there any objections to starting this policy with, because of the large number of requests for students, requests for studies in our schools, it is necessary to limit the number of established guidelines for the approval of studies?
So I see, so we want to get rid of as far as possible again. You're saying start.
Well, actually, the first sentence feels like a repeat from Policy 893. So the new information starts with kind of the rationale because of the large number. So my question is anyone opposed with striking that first sentence in Policy 893, Rule 1?
Oh, good.
I am not opposed to that. But I could see where it could be beneficial if somebody just turns to Rule 1 to be able to see that first sentence as we corrected it in the policy.
Okay. Board Member Miller, any comments?
No, I mean, I think it's fine because it's accompanying the previous one.
Fine to keep or fine to remove?
My apologies, fine to remove.
Okay. No problem. Do you have any strong feelings, Board Member Schneider?
I do not.
Okay. All right.
I
well,
would like to add, though, that
Sure.
sometimes people will turn to this policy, like Mr. Schneider mentioned, and they wouldn't have necessarily the context of it unless they're looking at the previous policy. That was the only thought I had with that.
Okay, so do you have strong feelings with keeping that first sentence?
I think we should keep it because each policy to me is this individual policy, and when people are looking at it, they may not have the context that we have, knowing that it's on the other policy itself.
Okay, no problem. The superintendent or designee, I would remove assigned designee, just to keep our language consistent, and then also removing as far as possible. Ms. Shope, do you need me to repeat that? Okay, thank you so much. All right, criteria for approval, number 1, utilizing school personnel, students or student records of the school district of Beloit for research projects. Of course, requirements must have prior approval by the superintendent/designee before the project is undertaken. What does undertaken mean? Does that mean before it's approved or before it's started?
I read it as, I see this as before it gets started.
Correct.
Okay, and not
Yeah.
approved?
Yeah, because sometimes you have in your thesis, like a master's project, you might have research that you're doing, but it's not on the scale of like a doctorate. And so I would suggest, I like that it says the project before it's undertaken, because if you're doing a small scale project for a thesis, you should have approval for that as well.
Okay. Are you opposed to making that language more specific so people know what undertaking means?
Not at all.
So before the project is approved?
That's great.
Okay. Well, no. See, now that doesn't make sense because it says the requirements must have prior approval before you begin. Is that the spirit of it? Okay. So before the project begins. Is anyone opposed to that?
No.
Okay.
Your first statement was fine too, when you said before it started. I mean, I think we all know what started means. That was your first statement.
Thank you so much. We'll go with begins. All right, in number 2, the objectives/timelines of the research should be clearly stated, and the design should produce valid and reliable. Is there a difference between valid and reliable in this context?
If you get in the weeds with doctoral research, there's a difference between validity and reliability.
Okay, perfect. And then my other question is the second to the last sentence, must accept direct responsibility related to the student's research. Is there space that a non-student would be doing research? Like if an organization wants to come in, I just don't want to limit us in policy language. Could we omit student and say related to the research?
I'm trying to think of a situation. Are you thinking of like an outside organization that might want to do research?
Yes, and if we leave it as students' research, that limits when there may not be a reason to limit it, is my only concern.
I could see an outside organization. What I run into is a lot of times by the time someone comes to you and says, "Can I do this research?" and they've gone through all of the checks and balances through the university, it's pretty safeguarded.
Yeah.
Where if an outside organization is doing research, I mean, I can see why you would want that, because I can think of some organizations that I would be happy to partner with, but they haven't necessarily gone through all of the checks that a university goes through. What are your thoughts on that, Dr.
Right.
Garrison?
That's what- I mean, for me, it's more about, you have to go through the proper checks and balances. That's what my original statement was going to say. I also know that we work with different organizations differently, and it may not necessarily have to be a research project, you know? And so I think this is more focused on the research part, which I would want to connect with the university.
So just so we're clear, this would limit any research not being done by a student. So if a professor was doing research, that would not be included under this policy because this says students' research.
What's a faculty member must accept direct responsibility related to the student's research? Well, the faculty typically works with the student that's doing the research. Am I reading this differently?
No, that's correct. But if a faculty person wanted to do research, this specifically says that this needs to be student research in the policy. So my question is there a benefit to making it that narrow?
I agree with you that there's faculty that do, I mean, as a faculty member or professor, you are expected to conduct research. So if we're approached by, you know, a college and it's a professor that's doing research, I personally would be open to that. So I could see why we might want to expand that language to not just be a student. Do you want to say, are you thinking like a faculty member?
So what if we just made a minor adjustment? So this faculty member must accept direct responsibility for their or their students' research.
Perfect.
Everyone okay with that? All right, Ms. Shope, did you get that? Okay, and then just for consistency in the language, that last sentence should be filed with the office of the superintendent. I'm sorry, say that again? Yep, the last sentence in number 2, filed with the office of the superintendent, not necessarily physically in. All right, and the last sentence, in general instructional activities will not be interrupted unless there is a clear significance for the educational program of the school district of Beloit. Is anyone opposed to changing that to clear benefit to? Because something could be significant but not be beneficial.
I'm okay with that change.
Okay. Board Member Miller?
I agree as well.
Okay. So again, that would say unless there is a clear benefit to the educational program of the school district of Beloit. All right. Is there a motion to approve policy 893 and 893 Rule 1 as amended to pass on to the full board for a first reading?
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously, and that brings us to meeting closing. Our next policy committee meeting will be on Wednesday, August 2nd at 5:30. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call to order. Oh, are you ready, Michelle, to start recording? All right. I call to order the July 5th, 2023 special board meeting, question review at 6:32 PM. Mrs. Shope, can you give us a roll call, please?
Yes. Brian Nichols,
Here.
Brian Anderson, Megan Miller, Amy Levy,
Here.
and Greg Schneider,
Present.
and Sean Levy.
Present. Did you get Mr. Anderson?
Brian Anderson,
So check his sound is working.
I'm not hearing him. Are you seeing him?
He's in the meeting.
Okay.
See, Brian, can you hear us? I just need you to unmute and tell us you're here. Okay, so we can't hear you yet. Hold on for a minute.
Everyone else has left the call.
All right, do we, Megan, can you hear us too? I think we're gonna hit the roll call one more time just to make sure we got everybody.
Okay. I can do
And we
that.
can hear. Can you hear Megan? Oh, I can't hear you yet. But my sound is turned off, but we're trying to.
I didn't know there was a separate meeting for this. I thought it was just with the other meeting, so let me dial it.
Okay.
Tech stuff, we're getting it together, getting it all together, so okay. It'll take some minute here.
Welcome to Google Meet. Enter the meeting pin followed by the pound key. Thank you. You're joining a call with more than 4 people. Please mute your phone.
Okay. All right, we'll give it another shot. All right, so we'll just start over again. I'm
Okay.
going to call to order the July 5th, 2023 special board meeting question review at 6:35 PM. Mr. Shope, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Brian Nichols,
Here.
Brian Anderson,
Here.
Megan Miller,
Present.
Amy Levy, Greg
Here.
Schneider, and Sean Levy.
Present.
All members are present with Megan Miller and Brian Anderson appearing virtually.
Is there a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Greg Schneider and seconded by Board Member Amy Levy. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We're on to 2A, Board Vacancy Preparation, Review, and Selection of Vacancy Questions. And so attached, with this attachment, are connected to questions that we asked in 2021 when we seated, using the same process, We seated members to the board. I'll just review the questions. I think each interview was scheduled for about 30 minutes, and we had 7 questions altogether. 1, please tell us a little about yourself, your education, work experience, and any other information you'd like to share, and tell us why. Should you be appointed as a member of the Board of Education? 2, how else are you engaged in our community? And is any of your experience relevant to serving on the Board of Education? Number 3, in some situations, you may be asked to accept a reality that is contrary to your own beliefs. As a Board of Education member, you may cast a minority vote on an issue passed by the majority of the Board of Education. What would your reaction be in this situation? Number 4, as a Board of Education member, you will receive input from people representing special groups or interests. How do you plan to use this information in the decision-making process? Number 5, in your opinion, what should be the relationship between the Board of Education and Superintendent of Schools? Number 6, what do you think are the most pressing challenges facing the School District of Beloit? And what do you think the board should do to address these challenges? And number 7, are you able to commit to a minimum of 2 nights per week, 2 nights per month for board meetings and possibly extra days for special meetings? Are you comfortable with reading documents thoroughly for comprehension, sometimes on a short time frame, and arriving at meetings fully prepared to professionally engage and execute the business of the School District of Beloit? How do you plan to manage your schedule to make this happen? So those were our 7 questions. One of the things I would say is a little bit different that when we wrote those in 2021, we're in a little bit of a different situation than where we are now, and I think everyone who is serving has a little bit more experience than when these questions were written. So we can start at number 1, whereas we have received information from applicants, but you're trying to let people loosen up, and for the board, for the community who will be listening to the candidates present themselves. That is our question. So I guess we'll start with number 1 and just comprehensively, just if you need to add, if we think we need to add to it, take away, make any adjustments, or keep it the same. And I'll just allow board members to open your mic and tell me what your thoughts are about number 1 as we structure the interview, or we can begin by just thoughts about the process for tonight.
I have a process question. I believe we have 5 candidates, and if we're doing 30-minute interviews per candidate, the way it's scheduled on our calendar is that candidate interviews start at 5, and Business Operations and Finance Committee meeting starts at 5:30. So that's going to be problematic.
Well, let me see how
And the
it's scheduled.
additional point to that is we may not need all of these questions depending on how much time we have for interviews.
Okay. So I think on the first part on the scheduling, we haven't put the agendas out for Tuesday. And so there's a balance of time that we need to. So the first way we can approach it as we're talking is that as far as our meeting on Tuesday, because of the holiday, we've not yet met in Tuesday. I've been working with Dr. Garrison so we can balance out the agenda. So we didn't have to have a special meeting to seat our school board candidates, since this is kind of one of our major pieces of work, which is we need to add our next board member. And we're within our time frame, but we didn't, as we were planning it out, did not want to have another special meeting. We're there. So, I mean, I think that it's a matter of what we're going to do with business operations, finance, our regular board meeting, and HR things, so that we can achieve that.
So this very specific reason why I brought it up is I think it would be important to know how much time we have for each interview, because that's going to dictate how many questions we select.
Well, I got you. Last time we had 30 minutes per candidate. That's how we're built out. I guess I'll take your thoughts about, because you have the input part about just the time, because we're going to use Tuesday as the time to get this work done. I go to Dr. Garrison first. Is there, as you look at the agenda part for business operations, finance, the HR, the regular board stuff, how much of that do we have that is pressing that needs to happen on that week and couldn't happen on the 18th or the
Sure. So for as it stands, I would think that your board would just want to do the interviews for the regular board meeting, starting at 7. I kind of work my way backwards, and then for the 6:30 meeting for the HR session. Naturally, if we make it a special session, we could start it earlier. But if it stays the way it is, we have to stick with the policy, which is it starts at 6:30. The HR session. There's some approvals that need to be approved as it pertains to new hires, but we could easily move those over until the 18th if that's what the will of the board. The committee piece that starts at 5:30, I did have a conversation with Mr. Chady today. We definitely believe we can move some of that conversation shorter, or we can move the conversation to the 18th. So, it's really up to, the decision of the board and me and your conversation as it pertains to how we want to work those opportunities.
My unsolicited opinion, emphasis on unsolicited, since we are already off schedule for the month of July because of the holiday, I would say that we have our first and only regular board meeting and committee meetings on the 18th, and we reserve the 11th for our candidate interviews. Because if we want to do 30-minute interviews, that puts us at 3 hours. You need transition time between candidates. So I am not in favor of adding 3 hours worth of interviews in the middle or right after any of the meetings that were just listed.
So am I hearing you correctly? We would prefer just to start the interviews at 5:30? Or, your opinion, sorry.
No, you're fine. And again, just one board member's recommendation. I would say on the 11th, unless there's something that's pressing or an emergency that we need to address, the only thing we should be doing on the 11th is candidate interviews. And then someone mentioned, I'm not sure who, that is the goal to have them seated on the 11th. We're going to make the decision or did I mishear?
No, I mean, they will, if we select on the 11th, I was reading the policy this morning, they'll take the oath at like the next office or something. It's not for them to take the oath on the 11th. They'll just be selected on the 11th. They'll take the oath on the 18th to participate at the next meeting.
So is it possible for us to do business operations and finance and teaching, learning, equity, and pupil services committee meetings on the 18th?
So it'll be of course, it'll be a tight session there because teaching and learning has a list of things they have to go over, and then of course businesses we'll be behind 2 meetings in that sense.
Yeah, one of the things to think about the business operations and finance is that that's also the committee that is missing a person. So when we do add this person, their assignment, which we also build into the agenda for when they're added, is their assignment will be the Business Operations Finance Committee, because right now we have 2 people we've been able to operate, and I think that Spencer also on the Teaching, Learning, and Equity and Pupil Services Committee, because I think Spencer was the board member that had the 2 committees.
I'm sorry, but to answer your question, we could, if that's what we need to do, we'll squeeze things to be in that hour time frame.
I have a procedural question, I guess. I thought we had to have the new board members seated by the 16th. Is that not? Am I missing? Did I interpret that wrong? I know that's a Sunday, but
Right. So just a minute, we go to the policy again. So kind of reading from the policy, when a vacancy occurs on the Board of Education, it shall be filled within 60 days by appointment by a majority vote of the remaining members of the board. So when we vote on the 11th, we will have met that requirement. Candidates for a board vacancy shall submit specified application materials in accordance with established procedures and participate in a structured interview. Before a board member appointee, so that would be the person we select, is legally entitled to hold office, the appointee shall execute a written oath of office with the board clerk. The board clerk shall administer the official oral oath at the next board meeting. Persons appointed to fill board vacancies shall hold office until a successor is elected and takes office according to Wisconsin state statutes. So by that statute, when we select the person on the 11th, we will have met our 60-day requirement, but they will not take office until the next board meeting. So it'll be after the 16th, the first time that they sit in. So at the next board meeting. All right. So what I would say is we will take the flexibility to work things around in our agenda for the other business that we have. And work to, now it would be nice to start at 5, but that is not something my schedule can accommodate. So
So are we still having the committee meeting? Could we start with that and then go into the interviews?
that is, which one, would you go to committee, HR as a committee of the whole?
No, I mean, unless there's something pressing, we can just save HR for the 18th. I was talking about business operations and finance. If there's an abbreviated meeting on the 11th, we would still have time to block off the 3 hours and do the candidate interviews. I just wouldn't want to start much later than 6, because that already puts us at 9.
All right. Board Member Anderson and Nichols, you are the two that are on the operations and finance. Are you able to have that meeting at 5 possibly?
Yeah, that'd work for me.
Okay, I don't know, Mr. Nichols?
Me also.
Okay, so we can have business operations and finance start at 5. And then we can have our candidate interviews to begin at 6. And then the business of the night is to select our candidate. Will that work, Dr. Garrison?
No, I don't have a problem with that. We're here, so yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right, so that is our time for the evening. Michelle, we did have about 30 minutes for each candidate last time we had our interviews. So it's a regular time frame there. So we'll start with question 1 as an introductory question. Anything to add or delete the question, or your thoughts on number 1?
I'm fine with number 1, but just as far as I'm assuming that all of the candidates will receive the questions in advance, like probably tonight or tomorrow after they're finalized. Is anyone opposed to they have 30 minutes, they have the questions, and they can share with us? Because us going round robin to ask a question that they already have in front of them, I think eats away at the 30 minutes of time. So if we give them the questions, however they want to answer them in their 30-minute allotment, that would be my preference.
I don't want to do that. And the reason that I don't is because I do. Everything is not about the efficiency. The questions have to get asked, but I want the space there to hear and understand. And then just say if it's a 30-minute open format presentation, if you feel like ducking question 4, 5, and 6, and that's how you use your time, that I want to hear each answer.
Well, I think board members, and then I'll yield the floor, but I think board members will take note of that. If you have people that have been given 7 questions and they didn't answer all 7 questions, then members take note of that and make their decisions accordingly.
Right. But that's the part also which kind of takes away the standard part of each interview, is that we're going to ask them each question. How they choose to answer the question with the time that's allotted is up to them. But what is standard is that each candidate has been asked a question. So that's a little bit more free form than I'd be in favor of giving during this process. Well, we've got 4 other board members. What are your thoughts?
Would it be possible to give people the option and just say, like, are you prepared to talk through your answers, or would you like us to ask you individual questions?
Whatever we decide is possible. I'm just going to say I'm not trying to have a very loose process. Because either we're conducting an interview or they're giving a presentation.
Sorry, we're not able to hear if anybody's speaking.
I mean, I can see the advantage of asking each question to get the response for each one that's organized, but the one advantage of going just open-ended, saying you have all of these questions you need to answer. You have 30 minutes to answer every question. You know, as board members, we don't always get the opportunity to get the questions up front. That oftentimes we end up having to respond quickly during meetings, or either board meetings or committee meetings. And it'd be a great way to see how well that they are organized and prepared for the meetings.
Do you have a preference?
At this point, I don't have a preference.
I believe I think it feels to me like it's more professional if you ask them the question, you know, rather than, I mean, we could literally take, each one of us do one question per interviewee, or, you know, almost one person two. But I think to just let them roll off, you know, the 7 questions in a row, that's just, I'm going back to my corporate experience on interviewing people. So, you know, they never knew what we were going to ask them. So, that's my 2 cents.
I don't have a strong preference one way or another, but I think if you ask the questions, I think it would help me if we ask the question so that I can, as I gather my notes, it's specific to that question, because if they just are going to try to hit all 7 at some point in their 30-minute soliloquy, it's like, yep, I want to make note of that here, I want to make note of it there. So in keeping things about me and what's important to me, I would say we could do one question at a time.
Megan or Greg, you got a position so we can kind of break the deadlock where we're at?
Yeah, I mean, I really seriously don't care, but like, I appreciate what Brian's saying about helping people structure their answers, and it might be a little easier for note-taking purposes. That's fine.
I'm okay with going one question at a time.
Okay, so we're kind of in that consensus area of, let's hit them one at a time. We'll try to be efficient so that we're moving through them. I'm pretty sure when they're done, they will be done. All right. So that's how we'll conduct the interviews one question at a time.
May I ask one other procedural questions before we select the questions? Just because we are currently a 6-member board, I think there may be some value to be very upfront about the selection criteria, or not criteria, the process, specifically voting. So we could have 2 candidates that are tied with the vote. We could have 3 candidates that are tied with the vote. So just if we could, and we don't have to do it the second, but I would like to be very upfront with how the voting process will go, so there are no surprises.
Yeah, just a minute. So Rule 133, Rule 1, and our policy talks about the public notice of the vacancy being there in the newspaper 2 times, which has happened over the 20 days. 2 candidates filling out the applicant resume and their declaration of candidacy, which they have done, and we have received that. The responsibility of the board secretary to notify the candidates of the interview, which she's working on as we're working this part out. We've received the materials. Just a minute. The board shall interview and deliberate over prospective candidates in open session at a regular or special board meeting, unless special circumstances justify convening in closed session for a portion of this process. The candidates will be asked to respond to the prepared questions, as well as any follow-up questions as are deemed appropriate by any board member. All candidates will be given an equal opportunity for appointment to the board. The district does not discriminate against candidates on the basis of sex, race, religion, national origin, ancestry, creed, pregnancy, marital or parental status, sexual orientation, sex change, gender identity, gender expression, gender nonconformity, or physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability. 6, at the conclusion of the interview process, the names of all persons who have properly filled the specified application who have filed the specified application materials for the position shall be placed on paper ballots. The remaining board, that's the 6 of us, shall elect a person to fill the vacancy. Voting shall continue until a candidate receives a majority of votes. Discussion may occur between ballots. The individual board member voting must legibly sign each paper ballot cast. After counting the votes, the board secretary shall report the vote tally to the presiding officer and record the numerical round of balloting on the ballots and enter them into the public record. All ballots cast shall be preserved and open to public inspection. So as I read number 6, we'll have round 1. The candidates' names will be there. The candidate to win needs to have 4 votes out of the 6. And let's say if there are a number, then we have 5 candidates, but let's say 3 of them get 2 votes each, then we'll have a round 2, and we'll vote again until we achieve one of the candidates gets 4 votes.
The specific reason I asked about process and clarity there is at one point when we've done this previously, I believe, and Board Member Miller, correct me if I'm wrong, that we had like 2 of the highest candidates, and so we moved them forward. So if our process is to keep all 5 candidates available for each ballot, I just want everybody to be clear about the process before we begin the process.
Oh, that's fine.
Does that make sense?
Right, yeah. I guess as I'm reading it from the policy and the rule that goes along with the policy, we're all in agreement that that's what we're going to follow.
No, but here's the thing. You can follow this policy. I don't think it's wrong to do either. So if you're voting and there are 2 people that have 3 and 3, 3 and 3, 3 and 3, or however, we have done in the past, we have dropped the people who got no or low votes as an option and moved forward with the highest vote, the top earners that did not earn a majority, and then just voted on them. So my only preference is we just need to state before we begin, are all 5 names eligible on each ballot that we vote on? And I'm not sure how many that will be.
All right. So again, so the way I see this, as I'm reading it, is the names of all the candidates. Let's say, because we don't know how many rounds it may go. Let's say Ms. Shope will start out with 5 of them. Maybe we have set up for round 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. On the first round, if 3 candidates each got 2 votes, all 5 people's names are still on the ballot, and we're going to keep going.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, voting shall continue until a candidate receives a majority of votes. Discussion may occur between ballots. Individual board member voting, yep, so. All right. Is everybody clear? Okay, think we got clarity. All right.
Just another going back to a point of clarity, with the candidates starting at 6 o'clock, we can also put on there to arrive, at the time frame, or we can say, 10 minutes before, just in case a candidate gets done early, and then we can start the interview a different time from that perspective.
Yeah,
Because if a candidate gets done within 15 minutes, then you, in essence, will be sitting here, well, you all be waiting for the next 15 minutes before the next interview will start. But if we let them know ahead of time that please arrive 10 minutes prior to your interview time frame, then it could be on a rolling schedule. But that's up to the board. I just want to make sure I put that out there.
right, so just let them know that this is the time their interview is scheduled to start, subject to I guess how fast the candidate in front of them is moving, or? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, so ready for number 1? Question number 1? Is that fine? Do you want to add to it, change it, or anything?
I'm fine with all the questions. Would it make sense to just say if anyone would like to add a question that's not on here or edit an existing question? Or is there a specific need to go one by one through all 7?
That's a way it could be done. That's not the way that I'm choosing to do it, though. I'm starting with question number 1, and I'm going to work us through each question.
I would like to see on the first question, including hobbies. So work experience, hobbies, and any other information you'd like to share.
Got an addition of hobbies. Anybody else on question 1?
I think it would read better if, at the end of it, it's a, why should you be appointed to the Board of Education? Instead of be appointed as a member of the Board of Education.
Appointed to. Okay. Please tell us a little about yourself, your education, your work experience, hobbies, and any other information you'd like to share, and tell us why you should be appointed to the Board of Education. All right, anybody else for number 1? Okay. Ms. Shope, are you able to fix these in the document? Okay. All right. So as we get to number 2, the engagement question. The question itself is, how else are you engaged in our community, and is any of your experience relevant to serving on the Board of Education? This is kind of the balance between, like, we have received their applications, but as we're interviewing them in public, other people have not had this. So that's a space where some of the questions themselves, I just kind of feel like I want to add certain things because we did not have a strategic plan the first time we did this. And now that we're doing this, there's just some parts that I want to make the questions reflective of our strategic plan to build that in. So for me, when I'm reading number 2, how else are you engaged in our community? And is any of your experience relevant to serving on the Board of Education? They'll share that, and we've also read that in some of their things. But I also want to ask them, it goes to that engagement section in our strategic plan of how do they feel that the board can better engage with our stakeholders? I want to include that, that part into the question. Does anyone else have things for number 2?
I would take out the word else and just say, how are you engaged?
Okay. Okay. So, anybody else with corrections or additions to number 2? All right. So, Michelle, we got how are you engaged in our community? And is any of your experience relevant to serving on the Board of Education? And I'll also add to that question, how do you feel that the Board of Education can better engage our stakeholders? And that was number 4 in our strategic plan. All right, number 3, in some situations, you may be asked to accept a reality that is contrary to your own beliefs. As a Board of Education member, you may cast a minority vote on an issue passed by the majority of the Board of Education. What would your reaction be in this situation? Anybody with anything for number 3? Okay. All right, I'll leave 3 as is. We'll move to number 4. As a Board of Education member, you will receive input from people representing special groups or interests. How do you plan to use this information in the decision-making process? Okay.
I do have one potential addition. I think it's important that sometimes we receive input from people in the form of a complaint, or they want us to take action about something, and just for any potential appointed board member to kind of know how to redirect those to the proper channels within the district, because not every concern comes directly to the board. But I don't have exact verbiage for that, but I think it would be an important addition.
So in number 4,
Actually, I do have, okay, so how do you plan to use this information in decision-making or redirecting the concern to the proper channel, or, I'm not married to whatever word comes next.
or do you want to ask them what is their criteria, or how are they deciding which things are for them to act on and which things are for them to pass on to the, they're supposed to pass them on to the superintendent, but what is their decision-making process? Are you trying to get them to?
Well, I don't want to lead them to an answer, but yes, that's what I'm looking to glean. But for example, if someone calls you and their student had an upsetting experience in the classroom, I wouldn't necessarily direct that person to Dr. Garrison. I would say, have you had a conversation with the classroom teacher? You should probably start there. And if you and the teacher are not able to resolve it, then the next step would be to have a conversation with the building principal.
Okay, what do you want to add to the number 4?
Okay, so how do you plan to use this information in decision-making or redirecting concerns to the proper staff member? And that could be up to and including Dr. Garrison.
How do you plan to use this information in decision-making or redirecting the issue to the proper staff member? Ms. Shope, do you have that? Okay. All right, so number 4, as a Board of Education member, you will receive input from people representing special groups or interests. How do you plan to use this information in decision-making or redirecting the issue to the proper staff member? Okay. Number 5, in your opinion, what should be the relationship between the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools? Does anyone have anything to add to number 5? Okay, let's go on to number 6. Number 6, what do you think are the most pressing challenges facing the school district of Beloit, and what do you think the board should do to address these challenges? Anybody with changes for number 6?
I would
No,
like
that's
to,
like my favorite question.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to add something positive to the end with that is what is the greatest asset in the district? Or what is the greatest strength of the district?
All right, let's, the interview's still only going to be 30 minutes, but let's hold it for, I would say let's not add it to that, let's add it to another question, because there's a couple parts that, people will list some challenges. We'll get to the assets too. But we'll save a space here. Anybody else on number 6?
No, but with respect to where it should be added, I would be in favor of adding it to number 1. I would love to start the interview off with that. Why should you be appointed as a member of the School District of Beloit? And please share what you believe are our greatest assets.
So I'd be for making that a whole number 2. I'm not slamming it together. But I got you in the placement. We'll come back to the positivity in a minute. Anybody else? Number 6? All right. So the thing that I would add to, well, maybe not add to 6, because number 6 is candidates identifying what they think are challenges. I do want to get to, let's say, well, this is where I would add a space, and technically, if I'm looking at where we might end up at, it looks like this might be like number 7 or number 8 or somewhere in there. But it's just, what is your understanding of the School District of Beloit's current financial situation? I do want to know what people know and understand about our current financial situation. So they can list whatever challenges they want to list, but I do want to know their understanding of our financial situation, and like their approach or their thoughts about it. So I would kind of add that I would make that a number 7. And then we can go back to the front side and deal with number 2, is making that like the understanding what this candidate, prospective person, thinks our strengths are.
Please excuse my interruption. I do have a question for you for consistency's sake.
Well, it might be number 9 or 8 at the time. I don't know yet. Is that good to ask about the numbering? Which one it is? Okay.
No. In number 6, it's the only time that I can see so far that the board is referred to as the board instead of the Board of Education.
Let's be consistent.
Okay, thank you.
So this might work for the somewhere in 6, between 6 and 7. What is your understanding of the School District of Beloit's current financial situation? What are your thoughts on how to address this situation? You have that one? All right. So let's go back to number 2. After number 1, they've told us about themselves, their hobbies, their work experience, their education, anything else they'd like to share. Number 2, Board Member Schneider, you're saying to understand what do they think the strengths of our school district are? Right. Leave room for them to give multiple? Okay. What do you believe are the strengths of the School District of Beloit? That would be our number 2. Board Member Lee, was there another space or is that the,
I am fine with that.
okay. So then we kind of got a 1, 2, now we got a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all right. Number 7 is kind of a yes, no question. Are you able to commit to a minimum of 2 nights per month for board meetings and possibly extra days for special meetings? Are you comfortable with reading documents thoroughly for comprehension, sometimes on a short time frame, and arriving at meetings fully prepared to professionally engage and execute the business of the School District of Beloit? How do you plan to manage your schedule to make this happen? All right. Finance. System as number 5.
I think it would be appropriate, since whoever is being appointed is assuming Spencer's old responsibilities, to specifically insert that information, like whatever, if it was the first Tuesday or the third Tuesday, or to kind of give them an idea of which meetings they would be expected to prepare for and attend.
This is business operations and finance, which is usually the first one in the month. Ms. Shope is, because I'm just clarity, or Megan, was Spencer on the Teaching, Learning, and Equity and Pupil Services Committee also?
Yes, he was.
All right. All right, and Brian Anderson is now the chair, so he won't have to be the chair of that committee. So I think it's business operations and finance and teaching, learning, equity, and pupil services, and then the HR committee, which is a committee of the whole. All right. So we got number 4, got number 5. So in my mind, there's only well, that was a question I had. So there's really only like 2 more questions that I have, or 2 thoughts that I wanted to make sure we capture somewhere. One of them is, recognizing that last year, our state report card, recognizing that last year on the state report card, we increased from 1 star fails to meet expectations to 2 stars meets few expectations. I am wanting to know it's a kind of a question about progress. We are increasing and positive things are happening. We already answered the question about what do you believe are the strengths in the school district. But there's a space in there for that acknowledgement of that success, or like what does, how do they measure growth? What are they looking at as growth in our district? Because there's times when our growth is being denied. And I want to have an understanding of where they're at with our progress as we're incrementally making it. So I haven't really structured that fully into a whole question yet, or it was kind of in that space, but that is one.
So 2 things. One, I'm not completely convinced that adding a 10th question is a good idea, since we have 30 minutes and the majority of the board is committed to reading the questions that the people will already have with them. But if we do feel it's important to add, I would use that to set the context for what I believe question number 2 is when we ask them about assets of the district. So how would you measure growth, and what do you believe are assets of the district? I think if we add it, that would be a nice place to put it.
So you're saying add that to number 2?
Yes, but in a way where it's context setting, and then it asks 2 parts. So 1, how do you define growth, or how would you measure growth? And then 2, what do you believe are the assets of the school district of Beloit?
All right, I'll wordsmith that a little bit. And then the only other thing that I wanted to ask was like something about the learning environment, as just letting some of the complaints that come, that those are different types of things. I know that there's already the question about, questions about, like in number 4 or number 5-ish, about receiving input from people, but that understanding of their perception or thought about our learning environments is something else that I wanted to hear about. If anyone has thoughts or placements.
So I would say no. And the reason why I would say no is that we don't have time in 30 minutes to ask them all the questions we want to know the answers to. And I think if we continue to add questions without removing questions, we are guaranteed that our interviews are either going to run over, or we're going to have to abruptly cut people off.
I think if you can answer number 7 by knowing that you've got time or not, then I think it'll fit. Because I don't have anything else to add besides those. So I'm trying to pinpoint several things that I think are high interest topics that are in conversation related to our schools. Our achievement question and our learning environment, and then we've addressed the finances also. Mrs. Shope, recognizing that this past school year, our state report card increased from 1 star fails to meet expectations to 2 stars meets few expectations. What do you believe are strengths of the school district of Beloit? How do you define growth?
So 2 things. 1, I hope you're going to email that to Ms. Shope. But I would switch the growth and the assets around, because if I'm understanding the question correctly, the movement on the report card establishes a measurement of growth. So I would continue with that before I move to assets.
Switch them around. Do you have the first part, Ms. Shope?
Recognizing that last year on the district
On the state report card,
Report card, the district increased from a 1-star fails to meet expectations to
2 stars meets.
few expectations. How do you define growth?
Mhm.
Okay. And then after that, I got, what do you believe are the strengths of the school district of Beloit?
Correct. And then let's see, number 6 is what question is about the challenges?
7.
Okay. And then is number 8 the understanding the finances?
Yes.
So this will make us a number 10 always. So before, what is the question, the pressing challenges? And before the understanding of the in between that and the finance question? I think that's the space where I ask, what responsibility do Board of Education members have for learning environments in our schools? And then we have 10 now. Did you get that one between 6 and, okay. Can you read it back to me?
What responsibility do Board of Education members have for learning environments in our schools?
Okay. All right. Okay, does anybody else have anything else to add or comment, suggestions as we work our way through? All right, can you read them back to us, 1 through 10, and then I think we'll be ready to go.
Number 1, please tell us a little about yourself, your education, work experience, hobbies, and any other information you'd like to share, and tell us why you should be appointed to the Board of Education.
Number
2, recognizing that last year on the state report card, the district increased from a 1-star fails to meet expectations to 2 stars meets few expectations. How do you define growth? What do you believe are the strengths of the school district of Beloit? 3, how are you engaged in our community, and is any of your experience relevant to serving on the Board of Education? How do you feel the Board of Education can better engage our stakeholders? Number 4, in some situations, you may be asked to accept a reality that is contrary to your own beliefs. As a Board of Education member, you may cast a minority vote on an issue passed by the majority of the Board of Education. What would your reaction be in this situation? 5, as a Board of Education member, you will receive input from people representing special groups or interests. How do you plan to use this information in decision-making, or plan to redirect the issue to the proper staff member? 6, in your opinion, what should be the relationship between the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools? 7, what do you think are the most pressing challenges facing the school district of Beloit, and what do you think the Board of Education should do to address these challenges? 8, what responsibility do Board of Education members have for learning environments in our schools? 9, what is your understanding of the School District of Beloit's current financial situation? What are your thoughts on how to address the situation? And 10, are you able to commit to a minimum of 2 nights per month for board meetings and possibly extra days for special meetings? Are you comfortable with reading documents thoroughly for comprehension, sometimes in a short time frame, and arriving at meetings fully prepared to professionally engage and execute the business of the School District of Beloit? How do you plan to manage your schedule to make this happen?
All right, so when we get to number 4 or 5, it's about the redirecting space. This part just, I know what we're asking in the question, but it just doesn't sit well because board members are not actually directing things to staff members. So it's more like, I think that's more like our complaint resolution cycle or something like that. So I'm looking for, I mean, do you understand what I'm saying about, if we're asking them, like, how do they redirect it to the proper staff member? That's a different space because board members don't direct to other staff members. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I kind of don't want to, the question sounds not right to me. I don't want to, I know what we're trying to ask, but I think there's something in there to get to that. So first, the question is, as a Board of Education member, you'll receive input from people representing special groups or interests. How do you plan to use this information in decision-making or redirecting the issue to the proper staff member? And I'm saying, like, I understand what we're asking them and what our intent is to hear them respond, but I don't like the question stem because we don't technically redirect to staff members. It sounds like something that I know we don't do. Like saying, like if you're concerned with your child's teacher, that's one thing, but maybe that's just the way I'm hearing it. I don't know. Other board members.
I absolutely do it. So if someone calls me and has an issue, it's a classroom issue, I'm not going to say call Dr. Garrison. My first question is, that's not a board issue. Have you had a conversation with that teacher? And if it's no, I would say, well, I encourage you to start with the teacher. I mean, I'm fine with you dropping it,
Well,
but I don't think it's a problem for it to be there.
I'm not trying to drop it, but I'm saying they already started with the board member. It's kind of the point of the question. I mean,
I would say or encourage them to direct the issue to the proper staff member. So again, we're not redirecting it, we're encouraging them to take their concern to the proper person.
Mr. Shope, can you read the second part of that question? They're like, when you get to the redirecting part.
How do you plan to use this information in decision-making or plan to redirect the issue to the proper staff member?
Board Member Schneider, what did you add in there? You kind of.
I would have said, or encourage them to direct the issue to the proper staff member. And maybe instead of or, I might include and. I prefer and. Use this information in decision-making and encourage them to direct the issue to the proper staff member.
All right, one more time, Board Member Schneider. You had and.
Right. How do you plan to use this information in decision-making and encourage them to direct the issue to the proper staff member?
Okay. Do you have that, Ms. Shope?
Yes, I do.
All right, okay. You finished all 10, didn't you? You went number 4, okay. So if everyone's fine with these, then I think we're done. Anybody have anything else you want to add? Okay. Then I will take us as being done, and these are our questions. All right, so we've selected our questions. Is 3A, adjournment. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy, seconded by Board Member Brian Nichols to adjourn. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, we are adjourned.